I ran another business with my brother, who I started Meter with for about a decade. We've always been interested in technology and software and hardware and networking and systems, and ended up working with our first business, working a lot with the government, as most people do in the area. That's right.
Yeah.
I was 12 and he was 14 when we moved to Virginia from Hyderabad in India. Yeah, I think the old adage of if you ask people for capital, they will give you advice. And if you ask people for advice, they will give you capital. Probably is like the closest truth to what happened with me. And so the problem we saw was networking is important. It's hard. It's expensive. It's time consuming. Products aren't that great. And nobody was caring about this and building it. And it turned out nobody really knows how to anymore. It's technology is on a J curve, right?
Yeah.
Something happened, takes a really long time for it to dissipate, and then suddenly it just shoots up. We saw this with the steam engine, we saw this with the telephone, we saw this with electricity, we saw this with networking. Yeah, I think over the course of like 20, 30 years, chaos will definitely happen.
Tech has reshaped our reality, redefining how we live, work, and connect. And driving this revolution, real people with bold ideas. Welcome to the Bridgecast, where host Scott Kinka has in-depth discussions with the brightest minds in tech. Together, they tackle the future of work, innovation, entrepreneurship, and navigating the new realities of AI and hybrid work. These conversations will give you the insights and strategies to stay ahead, both in business and life. The Bridgecast is a service of Bridgepoint Technologies. As the nation's leading tech advisory and consulting firm, Bridgepoint is disrupting the way businesses make and manage their technology and customer experience investments. We invite you to experience the better way, the Bridgepoint way. Now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
Hey, everyone out there. Welcome to the Bridgecast. Super excited about this episode. I have Anil Varanasi with me. He is the CEO of Meter, where he's been for close to a decade. We're going to get into all that background. Before we do, Anil, welcome to the show.
Scott, thank you so much for having me on. This should be fun.
It definitely will be fun. You were just telling me a little story about your last name.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest cities in the world, probably still one of the most eclectic places to ever visit.
Okay.
It's sort of like, Mecca or Jerusalem, but for Hindus, yeah, it's a fascinating place.
Got it. And we're going to talk about Meter as we get into this. You're the CEO there now. What did you do before that?
I ran another business with
Okay.
my brother, who I started Meter with for about a decade. We've always been interested in technology and software and hardware and networking and systems, and grew up in Virginia. Went to high school there, went to college there, and ended up working with our first business, working a lot with the government, first with the local, then state, then federal, as most people do in the area.
Yeah, got it. Um, and you and your brother left India. I mean, you were teenagers, right? I think I read in your bio.
That's right. I was 12 and he was 14 when we moved to Virginia from Hyderabad in India.
And this is your second gig together. How's that work?
19 years together. I think the easiest way to probably describe it, if there were two of me, one of them would have killed the other. But uh, luckily, my brother is probably the kindest, most intelligent person I've met in all these decades working professionally. And we're fortunate enough to work with probably some of the smartest and most accomplished people in the world. And he's up there as far as intelligence and kindness and that rare combination together.
We talked about him. I want to ask about you.
Yeah.
We have a lot of founders, business executives in tech on this. We'd like to learn a little bit about them. Um, I think every executive has a superpower at the end of the day. What's yours?
I am probably better than almost anybody I've met in the world at context switching. It is okay for me to do 50 things in a single day. I tend to respond to almost anything in a matter of minutes, sometimes in a matter of seconds, mostly. I have no problems context switching, and I've never had that problem. I can decide I'm going to work deeply on something and then just work on it deeply. I don't
Yeah.
need a preamble or wind up anything. And then suddenly I can decide I'm going to be in a mode where I'm just going to context switch all the time, and it's responding to, hundreds of emails, text messages, Slacks, phone calls a day. Okay, for me to like keep going back and forth
Yeah.
on different topics.
You've got some you have a who's who of investors in your business. I mean, obviously it's Sequoia Capital, but Sam Altman from OpenAI, Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, you have the Stripe co-founders in there. And this was a startup. I mean, you guys started this together. We'll just take us on that journey from, idea to, you know, being engaged with some of the greatest minds in technology in the US in particular.
Yeah, I think the old adage of if you ask people for capital, they will give you advice. And if you ask people for advice, they will give you capital. Probably is like the closest truth to what happened with Meter.
Okay.
We had run another business, like I mentioned, for about a decade. We had done decently well. We actually didn't want any outside capital for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
There was all this change happening in networking, especially across hardware, across operating systems, across routing algorithms, and what was really happening at scale. But it felt like nobody else cared about this as much as we did. So we just said, hey, we're going to go start doing this from the ground up. We're going to build the hardware, write the software, all these things. So we just started just doing it, just the two of us. And as we started writing a bunch of operating systems and trying to build hardware life cycle and the iteration cycles were too slow for us.
Okay.
So, from Virginia, we had decided to move to San Francisco mainly because we were trying to figure out how this city of 800,000 people figured out how to build software for 8 billion people. We're like, is it in the air? Is it in the water? What's
Yeah.
going on? And so we came here, we started writing software, trying to build hardware with it. But we design a PCB or something like that, and it would take weeks and sometimes month to 2 months for that PCB to come back, right? We,
Yeah.
especially 10, 12 years ago, did not have any infrastructure in the United States for any manufacturing. Most of it had been shipped outside of the US with all the equipment in the 80s and 90s. And a lot of times this was coming back from China. So, we started looking into it. How can we make hardware iteration as fast as software iteration? And it turned out most of this happens in the city called Shenzhen.
Mm-hmm.
Shenzhen is one of the most fascinating places in the world. It was one of the first economic zones, special economic zones that China had set up,
Yeah.
where free trade and other things were just open and can really just grow. And what's interesting about Shenzhen is, 30 years ago, it was sort of a fishing village with about 30,000 people.
Yeah.
And in 30 years, it went from 30,000 to 30 million people, roughly.
Yeah.
Uh, it's amazing. So we decided that to have the hardware iteration cycle just as fast as software, we naively said, and if you ask my brother, he'll tell you that it's me who said it. Let's just go to China, figure out how to build hardware at scale. How hard can it be? Let's go for a month. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Turns out we were a little bit off. we ended up living there for about a year, 18
Okay.
months, building out the hardware. Then we came back and wrote software. And we ended up spending our own capital, even getting it to production hardware, and started bringing on customers. But the thing that's really great about Silicon Valley with the capital S and V is that the networks are actually really small. If you are doing good work and interesting work and differentiated work, somehow everybody finds out really fast. So a lot of these folks, and I'm happy to go into specifically each how it happened.
Yeah, that's okay. You don't need to do that, but I
Yeah,
totally understand. Yeah.
yeah,
We're out in Silicon Valley as well. I mean, it's the smallest big community in the world.
yes,
At the end of the day, right? This is a good
yeah,
idea. Um,
yes.
we could explore, manufacturing in China probably for the remainder of this time. Are you still doing that? You still manufacturing the hardware itself in China today?
We manufacture in Taiwan now,
Okay.
mainly because of scale and where our equipment and chip manufacturers are. We
Yeah.
work with Qualcomm and Marvell and Intel, And for supply chain and other purposes, it's way faster and better and higher quality to do it in Taiwan, because that's where they all manufacture their own chips too.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Innovated in China, manufacturing in Taiwan. You're writing in Silicon Valley. That's your. I get all that. Uh, Makes sense. We're saying all this, and we didn't get to the meter conversation. I mean, you guys. Every good company starts with an idea. So before you tell us about meter, why don't you tell us about the problem that you were trying to
Yeah.
solve when you founded the company?
Yeah. Networking is incredibly important in the world. Everything in the world is packets. We're doing this recording right now. The listeners who are listening on their phone, to when they go get coffee, to all the cool things that are happening in AI and workloads and literally everything is just packets.
Hmm.
But the problem that we saw was it was hard, time consuming, expensive, and without great products in networking.
Hmm.
Somehow, what happened is, as computer science started having abstractions on top of each other, almost nobody studied networking anymore, which meant there were no real great networking companies being built at all for decades.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and so the
players everybody
problem
would
is,
know and is still in their networking
yes,
closet, right? Yeah.
that's right. And those got started decades ago. But if you go to any CS program today, for example, there's maybe two distributed systems classes and like 2 weeks of networking, and that's it. That's all people
Yeah.
know. And so the problem we saw was networking is important. It's hard. It's expensive. It's time consuming. Products aren't that great. And nobody was caring about this and building it. And it turned out nobody really knows how to anymore. So we set out to really solve that end to end.
Got it. And what that means at a high level, from my
Yep.
understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because there's a lot to networking, right? We're talking public side,
Yes.
private side, LAN, WAN, everything in between. As it manifests itself in the marketplace, what you guys, and you'll have to correct, this is my commercial on you guys, right? Being a partner, but um, really is sort of a next generation managed Wi-Fi service at the core. There are many things that you do, but the thing that makes you very unique in my mind, at least that I see, is kind of Wi-Fi at scale with, you know, significantly less complexity, I think. And I may have limited it. So if I've limited what you are, tell me, please. I want to get the story right. But
Yeah.
how far off am I?
You're not far off,
Yeah.
but it's like a fog of war thing. I think you stepped in
Yeah.
and you mentioned a little bit, but the fog of war is pretty large.
Okay. Yep. Yep. Expand it
So
for me.
yeah, so it's relatively simple. What we do is handle networking end to end, entirely vertically integrated without any capital costs for customers. So all customers have to do is give us addresses and floor plans that might be across warehouses, life sciences labs, offices, retail, healthcare, hospitality, whatever it is. They give us addresses, floor plans, and answer some questions about how they're trying to solve their problems
Yep.
in their business. And then our racks show up, which have everything from power units that we build, routing, switching, indoor Wi-Fi, outdoor Wi-Fi, cellular, and security, all built entirely end to end by Meter, from designing the hardware to writing the firmware, operating systems, distributed systems, APIs, applications, models, all integrated. And this is all done entirely end to end, where we help design the networks, deploy them, and then help maintain them. And we do this all without any capital cost at all for customers or partners. We take on that risk entirely. And I'm happy to get into why we do that. And so, what we do for our customers is provide really great networking that's fast, secure, reliable, that's end to end across routing, switching, wireless, and
Hmm.
security. And who we're building for is essentially the CIOs, CTOs, and networking teams. One of the other things we've really been baffled by is how bad networking software is and how much nobody has done anything great in
Yeah.
decades.
Yeah.
When they hear something like a managed service from somebody like Meter that's end to end, customers might think it's a black box and they don't have any control, but it's actually entirely on the contrary. Even though we do this all entirely end to end, we give incredible amounts of control where we want the networking and IT teams to be able to make any changes and be really productive. So Meter is a vertically integrated solution for networking, entirely end to end, without any capital costs.
Got it. So what's unique? And I think I got the unique part, right? Like, so, because there's a you can't shake a stick without hitting a managed network services company, if we're being
Yes.
honest, right? But
Yes.
it's usually routing. It's and sometimes it comes from the carrier themselves, right? We're gonna and we'll monitor it, let you know when it's down. Um, it's sometimes switching, right? Very often not distribution. I mean, very often not core, but sometimes distribution, right? And then it's almost never Wi-Fi, if we're being honest, right? You have a very few competitors in that space, but those services don't get into core switching, they don't get into routing, they don't get into it.
Yep.
So I think the thing that's one super differentiator, which is kind of why I focused on Wi-Fi, is because that's the one component nobody wants to touch who is a managed network
Sure.
services provider. That's number one. I think too, your pricing model is super interesting. I would love to know a little bit more about how you came to that conclusion, right? Like, I think everybody
Yeah.
gets it. The description is really simple. Gang, you send them the network, a diagram, and they will charge you by the square foot effectively to make sure that you can connect to the outside world, regardless of what the model is. And I'm oversimplifying, but man, that's got to be like, I'm thinking about the people that you have who you treat as your mentors and are involved in your business, and they probably looked at you very sideways when you said that was going to be your pricing model. Like, tell me about that meeting when you guys made that decision.
Yeah, I think there's three ways businesses can differentiate
Okay.
themselves. One is technology,
Hmm.
just pure. How much better is your technology and your IP compared to other people? Second is how are you integrating things and simplifying a otherwise fragmented or complicated stack? And third is from a TCO and pricing perspective, is it not just marginally better for customers, but is it significantly better for customers?
Yeah.
And usually when people start businesses, they end up selecting like one of these or maybe two of these. We were naive enough to do all three.
Yeah.
So, on the technology side, how we build our hardware to how we write our operating systems and firmware and distributed systems and APIs, it's incredibly different. Happy to go deeper into that. How we do the integration across the fact that we'll design it and magically somehow racks and APs appear everywhere.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah.
And then to answer your question on pricing, we actually work backwards from two things, and then decided on pricing on how it came about. First is the customer experience, and then second is what are we trying to do long term.
Yeah.
So we spent a bunch of time going talking to CIOs, VPs of IT, VPs of networking, CTOs, and others. And they all said a couple of things. One, that networking is one of the largest spends they do in their cycles because you have to buy all this equipment, especially as you have massive amounts of locations, massive infrastructure. You're spending a lot of money. Second, it felt like once a vendor sells hardware to them, it's much harder to get a hold of the vendor after that.
Drop
Much
and
harder.
run. I get you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then third, they have to keep doing this every 5 to 7 years, depending on their business. And they have to keep going back to procurement and financing. Like, hey, remember that 20 million we spent?
Yeah.
I'm back. Give me another 20. I have to like
And
refresh.
it's lumpy. It's lumpy. It makes it hard
Yep.
for accounting to deal with. It's hey, it makes well, they're going to amortize. It doesn't matter. You still need the cash. Like, all that
Yep.
stuff becomes very, very difficult. In particular for the CFO, engaging with a CIO who doesn't talk CFO. Like, it's just that
Yeah.
consistent thing that is a flex inside the business makes it very difficult. So I totally get that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So couple that with what is the we were trying to do long term. So I like things when the incentives are very aligned with our customers and what would make Meter successful. That's really important for us to do constantly. So, we started looking at line items for CIOs and CTOs, and everything turned out to be that the incentives were aligned with their vendors, that they would only pay their vendors if the service was working, That might be things from AWS to GCP to Zoom to whatever. Pick your software or hardware.
Yeah.
But networking was the last thing that wasn't there.
Yeah.
So then what we decided to do is flip that. Is can we set up our balance sheet and our finance operations that we take on the capital risk entirely? And the reason to do that is in our model, no capital cost. That 20 million has now gone to zero. We are not taking capex and amortizing it over opex. We take on the entire risk of the capex.
Mm-hmm.
We only charge the opex of making sure that the networks are better. What customers also get along with that maintenance is that when we release new hardware, we will upgrade our customers as well.
Okay.
But the reason it aligns with our business model, it actually ties back to what is it that we're trying to do at Meter. So let's say there's a customer in a large warehouse that's a 500,000 square feet. We install Meter. They're doing really well. Their business is growing. They are trying to move from that 500,000 square feet to 1,000,000 square feet warehouse. When they move, we'll go outfit that 1,000,000 square feet warehouse with Meter as well. But because we never charge for the hardware, we'll actually just leave our hardware in that original 500,000 square feet warehouse for the next tenant as well.
Got it.
And that's where actually most of the business and even the name for Meter comes from, which is buildings have electricity and water and telephone lines.
Got it.
And there's power meters and water meters. That's why we're even called Meter. We believe internet infrastructure should be more like a utility rather than something you're fending for yourself all the time. So we're going to make the capital investment for decades and let our customers benefit from it. But we're also making the bet that Meter will be way more valuable year 20 and 30 because of that investment.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said earlier too about that sort of this being almost like the last, bastion of having to capitalize, and then depreciate investments. Um, we did it with communications, and we did it with contact center solutions, and we did it with software, and we've obviously done it on the computing side of the house. One of the things that is complicated at the early phases of that, for our listeners, they know I spent a lot of my time in, voice over IP and unified communications. Like at the beginning, it was like, wait a minute, how much per person I spent, and like getting that analysis done. Do you find yourself like when you're meeting with a customer, having to almost prove to them what they're spending, right? And what I mean by that is, obviously it's very clear what they spend on their networking gear and what their maintenance costs, continue to be with insert whatever name you want here. We won't pick on anybody. But then there's also care and feeding time, productivity time, like the soft cost side of this. It feels like in many of these other areas, we're well over that. Like we've accepted SaaS, we've accepted anything as a service. But this is sort of the last frontier in a lot of ways. Do you find yourself having to jump in and really help CIOs actually understand what they're spending in both hard and soft costs before they'll kind of be able to get their head around the number?
I think the more complex a business is and the larger business, because we work with some of the largest companies in the world, actuating for the soft costs is really hard. But luckily for us, our TCO is so good, even just on the hard cost. We do a TCO analysis just on the hard cost.
Got it.
And then have a next slide saying, now you've seen that, plus add the soft costs in that you can estimate yourself. Because it's really hard, if you're talking about a company that has 10,000 people, for the CIO to actually think about, I've got, 300 people in networking, and in IT, I've got 1,000 people. What are all the soft costs? That's really hard to actuate.
Yeah.
But when we do a TCO analysis, Scott, over the course of 5 or 7 years, our customers end up saving so much capital without any of the risk. And it's not a depreciating asset, and it's, next year something new comes out and it's just waste what's been sitting in there. Pricing just becomes incredibly obvious to customers. But what you're saying on the soft cost is a super insightful thing to think about. Our best customers who become our long-term partners, soft costs, when they're able to actually figure out how much time is being spent by people in their organizations, if they're a CIO or a CTO, but people in other organizations that rely on them that are
Yeah.
wasting time because the
Yeah.
infrastructure isn't great, the value is immense because of how good our hardware and software is and how integrated it is.
Yeah.
It's a single rack that drops in, again, from power, routing, switching,
Amazing.
wireless, DNS security, Wi-Fi, cellular, in a single dashboard. The value is immense for customers.
Sure. Sure. I mean, it's great that you can get to the savings or at least the, consistent cost basis without requiring the soft cost justification. So I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's pretty remarkable at the end of the day. Um, a couple quick hits here before we have a little
yeah,
fun at the end of this. One, you just announced a Microsoft with Microsoft. You just announced a partnership with Microsoft
yeah.
for AI efficient networking. Somebody cooked that up in marketing, but what does that mean? Like, what is it that you guys are doing together?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is Microsoft, for people to understand, is probably one of the largest customers in the world of networking,
Yeah,
just because of their scale and things like that.
yeah,
So that should set the stage on how much they care about infrastructure. So first, what we're doing is investment and support from them. So it's rooted in like the fact that we believe networking is important. As we develop products, they're going to offer expertise and design and performance for it just because of the scale of what they see.
hmm
Uh, Second, we released a product called Command in
yeah,
the fall last year. We've got some other really large model products coming as well. Microsoft is going to help us with compute. It's going to require massive amounts of compute. They have some of the best infrastructure anywhere, so they're going to do that.
got it.
Um,
And command
Third,
is really where you're. This is sort of the hey command, what's wrong with my network
yeah, that's
kind
right.
of
Yeah,
approach.
command does three things very simply. One, exactly like you're saying, natural language to get information. I have 100
Yeah,
locations, 10,000 pieces of hardware. Let me just ask what I want. You get information back.
yeah,
Second, natural language to take action. Hey, for all of my retail locations, make sure port 72 is blocked for whatever reason, just as a
yeah,
trite example. Instead of having to go through that manually across hundreds of locations, just instantly happens just by saying that exactly as the way I said it. Third, what command can do is take natural language and convert it into software entirely on the fly. One of the beliefs we have is that software should be soft.
yeah,
Uh, we believe that as time goes on, most software will just be generated on the fly based on what the user wants.
yeah,
So we know that Scott's been a CTO before, now he's in a strategy role. He wants to have a bigger picture of what's happening. And if you just say, hey, command, give me a dashboard I can share with my CTO, at the speed of a Google search, they'll just write the dashboard and just give it to you,
yeah.
fully custom the way you want it to be. So that's our command product.
That's
And
wild.
yeah, so command scaling that compute is one. And the last thing is market expansion with them. Azure Marketplace is one of the
hmm
great channels there is.
Yep.
So it's to promote and sell and distribute Meter products to more customers globally, and ideally work on selling with customers together. And so the partnership has been a while in the making, but working with Satya, Jay and Jason and so many other folks there. We're super excited by it, and I think we'll be hopefully one of like the great partnerships a smaller company has done with a large
Yeah,
company.
I find that to be amazing, particularly when you're talking about the traditional companies that you're competing against, right? In the networking space. You said three things there on the Microsoft partnership. We explored two and three, but I think number one that you mentioned is the one that's the most interesting to me. Microsoft is consuming most of the packets that may be ill performing on your network, right? On a traditional, fashion. So for you guys to be co-developing at least, hey, we have this new version. You've got this new version. Let's make sure that we're managing these packets. I mean, just thinking about the amount of Teams traffic as an example, or Zoom traffic, like being aware of how that performs against the other things that are happening on those platforms in the network is it's essential to the way that we're communicating today. I mean, I started my career in voice over IP, and every year we're like, this is the
Yeah.
year of video, right? And it wasn't that the video, um, opportunity, the technology wasn't supportive of it. It was that the networks were largely not supportive of it. Number one, and then two, behaviorally, I'm not sure we were ready.
Right. Right.
But something drove that, right? So then enter COVID, and then all of a sudden, Back to the Future is here, and we're looking at each other on video every day. And so before we jump into the some fun at the end here, a couple fun questions. I'll use this question as a transition. I was doing some reading on you guys, in particular you and your brother, and you shared some funny stories about COVID and growing the
Yeah.
company during COVID. I mean, in an era where people were trying to figure out what they were going to do with their offices, right? And then everybody's trying to cut things back. And I read some fun anecdotes about you guys. Like you started staging gear out of your garage. You have to tell me more about this. Just give me a quick.
Yeah, it was probably, one of the hardest times in my professional career
Yeah.
was through COVID. Looking back, obviously, it's funny and things like that, but at that moment, it was really hard. Because not only we were delivering networks for like physical world, but also supply chain was impossible to
Uh-huh.
get working.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
impossible. We were on calls with folks in Taiwan almost every night trying to get some hardware out somehow.
Yeah.
It was nearly impossible. And then when we did, with all these no contact, no touch rules, it was just crazy on where are we even going to store all this hardware? Where is it going?
Yep.
There's no folks working in warehouses. Nobody's allowed to go. We were not considered like mandatory and critical in any way. And so, yeah, it ended up we ended up storing it in one of our early colleagues who's been with us for a long time. His garage and other places, and literally pallets would show up with trucks outside his garage, and we would wheel them in.
Yeah.
And him and his family and his spouse, they were all really kind to be like, yeah, sure, take over, and just wheel in professional pallets into a home.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just like a wild time to think back on.
I mean, that's the beauty of entrepreneurship at the end of the day, right? What's your job? I'm chief cook and bottle washer every day, right? I love that story. Let's jump in. Is it okay to jump into a little bit of fun before I let you go?
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay. Couple quick ones. And we sort of have fun with these questions because we use them and we vary them across different guests, and we sort of compare them and have some fun with them. So I'm going to ask you the first one. Transitionally, coming out of the business conversation, just give me some kind of shameless prediction. I don't care what it is. It could be technology. It could be sports. It could be entertainment, something over the next 12 to 18 months that we can look back and see how right you were.
I think in 12 to 18 months, simultaneously, it will turn out to be models are incredibly good.
Yeah.
And the fact that almost nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Even if you look at models today.
Yeah.
And if somebody would have told you 5 years ago that this is the capability that you're going to have, and somebody might have told you this 10 years ago, you would have said there would be chaos in the world. Everything would have changed.
Yeah.
Economies would be up and down and things, but almost nothing has changed. And I think that'll be true for the next 12 to 18 months too.
Gotcha. Is there a time when the chaos does happen? Do you have a longer look?
Yeah. I think over the course of like 20, 30 years,
yeah,
chaos will definitely happen.
But it'll take that long, and we're going to be at.
Always does. It's technology's on a J curve, right?
Yeah, yeah. 100%.
Something happens, takes a really long time for it to dissipate, and then suddenly just shoots up. We saw this with the steam engine. We saw this with the telephone. We saw this with electricity. We saw this with networking. Over and over again, systems level things. It's ironic that OpenAI's first product was called GPT, because normally GPT in economics stands for general purpose technology.
Yeah.
And all general purpose technologies have a J curve.
Yeah.
Just takes a really long time for them to go into the economy and like dissipate.
Yeah, completely. And in particular, where we're just sort of, I say all the time, and we do quite a bit of this kind of discussion around AI, like we're in the era of get some right now. And what I mean by that is like every CEO, every board of directors, like, go get some AI. I don't really know what I'm going to use it for in my business right now, but I'm going to just go get some. We'll figure that out. And I think it's an even more interesting thought process around the J curve in any technology adoption when the technology itself is learning. Like we've never really had that kind of scenario too. And
Great point.
it's almost difficult to judge. You get into, when's the singularity and is it thinking and Turing tests and it's going to be, I think the rules by which we'll judge our progress are not even set, which is kind of what's going to be really interesting over the next, to your point, 20 to 30,
but also like humans by definition just always want more. Again, even 5 years ago, somebody would have told you Turing test would be passed. It's been passed. Who cares? We literally are like, it doesn't matter. Like, what is this thing doing for me? So I think that sort of thing will continue until a new generation of people enter the workforce. Where they've used these things from the ground up, and that's the default way they do things. That's when change will happen. And why I even say this whole 20-year thing is you want people who grew up using these things, and it takes for them to be in decision-making roles before things will change.
That's super interesting way of thinking about it. Okay. Well justified prediction there. What's the most recent leadership advice or leadership lesson that you've had that you wish you knew when you started Meter? Like you learn every day. What's the most recent one that you're like, man, if I had only had that 10 years ago?
I don't think anything comes to mind, but the thing that I constantly do think about is how much time are you spending with customers? I think that can actually just keep going up and up and up. Usually as businesses grow, that tends to go down, right? When you start a company, you're always talking to customers. Then over time, you end up talking to customers less and less. And then culturally too, as companies grow, you end up talking to customers less and less because you're constantly like doing things internally and trying to get this process done, that thing done, whatever. But I think if you can actually try to push the inverse of that curve, saying as time goes on, we should talk to customers more. That probably is something I've been thinking a lot about.
That's amazing. Yeah. Make sure you don't get stuck in the business of being in business. At the end of the day. That's right. All right. Love that. Last one. I asked this to everybody. Maybe your marketing department prepared you. Maybe they didn't, but so
zero preparation.
I love this. That makes it better. Whatever the dystopian future that's going to happen descends upon us, and you can choose whichever one you like, but there's only one app that's still working on your phone and you get to choose. Which one is it?
The only one that matters, the browser.
Okay. Fantastic.
That's it. Nothing else matters. Information retrieval is the only one because I can get to anything else from the browser.
I love it. Okay. I mean, that's a simple one. We've had so many strange answers to that one. You have no idea. I think the answer somewhat depends on what you think the dystopian future is going to be. Right? Like,
what's your answer?
I just assumed I was going to be in a cave somewhere. So I always say music or flashlight, one or the other. Super useful. Anil, this was the best half hour I've spent all week. I'll be honest.
How kind of you to say.
A lot of fun. Looking forward to doing a lot more with you guys. Obviously, Bridgepoint and Meter are partnered, and we're starting to do some good things together. We're thrilled to have you on here. It was great to spend a half hour together, and I hope our listeners enjoyed it as much as I did.
Awesome. Thank you again, Scott, for having me.
Well, thanks so much for being a guest here on The Bridge. And for those of you who are listening, we'll see you soon on another episode. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepoint Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepoint, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepoint, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.